Yes.
Amazing. I am so honored to be here with you all. My name is Jesse Johnson. These are the conversations on race, spirituality, and success. And I'm so honored to be here with my forever partner, Srikala,
Aloha,
and
aloha. So good to be here.
musician, healer, coach extraordinaire, and our super special honored guest tonight, Nadine McNeil, aka Universal Empress.
Yay! Thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be here with both of you also.
Nadine is a brilliant yoga teacher based now in Bali, which is kind of amazing. We are literally connecting across the globe. And she is also really incorporating coaching specifically around the integration of yoga and race at this time and supporting people in understanding how to work with the world in the times that we're living in. So we met sort of strangely through Elena Brower. I feel very fortunate that she happened to connect the dots and introduce us. And we're super honored to be here and just get to dive in with you, Nadine.
Thank you. Me too.
I love your Instagram handle.
Oh,
I
Universal Empress.
Yeah, it's like those things are hard to come by. Just like great combinations of words on Instagram. It's like sometimes you sit there for like hours trying to find a good name and like boom, Universal Empress.
Yes, Universal Empress was born, wow, over a decade ago when I started writing. And, once you have locks, the covenant in Jamaica, you're referred to as a woman as Empress. And in my former life, and still do now, I traveled a lot. So my friends always used to say I was the gypsy. So I thought,
Mm.
Universal Empress sounded rather noble. Little did I know what I had to live into, because as we know, words sound power, So
Uh-huh. Yes, indeed.
it's been a big seat to step into, and I am grateful.
Mm.
Will you
Amazing.
talk a little more about that? Like, what did you not know about claiming those words when they came to you? And what have you stepped into that you recognize now those words demand of you?
It's a powerful question, Jesse. If we look at the word empress, the word of royalty, the word that you are an example, as it were, which means for me that I have to walk my talk and live into my truth. And so there's that aspect. And then when I look at the universality of things, connecting to this planet, the universe, the stratosphere in which we live in, so that I not only see life through my lenses, but I'm able to macro out, as it were, seek to understand rather than to be understood. I feel that's what the brand has done through the yoga, through the speaking, through the mentoring, and just how I show up in the world. So on that level, yeah, it's made me have to, walk a big walk and carry myself in a certain way.
Mm.
Would you do it again? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. In fact, I can't even think of another name. I remember at one point, because I also do corporate coaching and I've come from a very corporate background, and speaking to a couple of marketeers who said to me I had to lose Empress to go corporate. And I said, I
Mm.
don't think so, because the corporate that I'm looking to align with, they will see that divinity in the feminine. They will see that it's a global concept that's inviting us to step into the highest expression of who we are.
Mm.
I love that you're saying that. I think that that's really important. There's something about I'm making two connections. One is immediately I was like, oh yeah, my dearest friend and mentor, Ra Goddess, like also has that's a big claim. And like she rocks with that. She's a best-selling author. She works in
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of corporate consulting, and I had not really totally grokked the boldness of claiming that name in all the spaces that she claims it. And so I'm a little wowed by the two of you.
Mm.
You would really like each other. If you don't know Ra, I will make
No,
that
I don't.
introduction.
But yes, I love that connection. Thank you.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Mm.
The other piece is a theme for me that I'll connect the dots around too, is that the things that matter to us matter. And that we don't have to like segregate ourselves, like, well, this part can be appropriate in this context, but this part I have to keep only for this. That, like, for me, this conversation about race feels like an invitation. I could have taken it a long time ago. I want to be honest about that too. And I am being called to claim, like, yeah, this has mattered to me for a long time, but I've been keeping it over here. And all of a sudden it feels like not only am I welcome to bring it to the table, but it's like necessary to bring it to the table. And that we don't need to sort of compartmentalize these different parts of ourselves.
Yes. I feel that many of us who have been in the background, for lack of a better word, what we were doing was actually sharpening our tool. You know, I was writing a piece just before we dropped in that actually originated some 15 years ago, because for me, even as a young child, I could sense that something was wrong with these disparities based on skin color, but I didn't have the emotional vocabulary at that time to explain it. And, you know, the conversations that we're entering now are uncomfortable conversations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so we have to be sure, those of us who have chosen to speak, and I don't know if we have chosen or we have been chosen, you know, but we have to be grounded in ourselves when we dare to step into this forum. So nothing happens before its time. And one of the things I've certainly said to myself, you know, from coronavirus coming right to where we are now, everything in my life has sort of prepared me to show up and be a part of this conversation.
Mm-hmm. I love that. There's something about, because we have this in common, the West Indies and yoga colliding. My family's from Barbados, and I can hear from your accent, and also just geeking out on you that you're from Jamaica. Uh, and I love that. I love the combining of those two elements. And I know in this world, it also can be a pretty white dominated world in that realm of yoga. What's been your experience as someone coming from the West Indies, diving into the world of yoga, and experiencing that whole realm?
Thanks for asking that question, Sri. You know, I entered yoga when I was living in the Netherlands.
Mm,
God, we're looking at 2001, somewhere about there. Predominantly white community, and much of my adult life, I have been in predominantly white communities, as it were. And so I didn't feel uncomfortable. And I think this is one of the things we share in common, having this Caribbean, this West Indian background, and we can unpack that later and how that impacts on how we show up as adults of color, as it were.
mm-hmm,
And, you know, I remember going off to India, doing my first teacher training with Shivananda. There were 177 of us enrolled in that training. Only two of us were Black, me from Jamaica, a younger sister from Harlem. And one of the things where I felt yoga gave me a sense of peace and belonging and not having to defend myself was that where I showed up, I didn't feel that the issue of skin color was an issue for me. And
mm,
then as yoga started to grow and spread, you know, we would read different articles, some of them pretty disturbing, about how people of color were being treated, showing up in these environments, you know, particularly in big cities, New York, LA, etc. I struggled, and I say this tentatively. Initially, I struggled with this business of yoga for people of color because what I felt and I still do feel is that if we're bringing separateness into the yoga realm, we're perpetuating that which we're coming from. Having said that, I also understand, particularly in the United States, that people of color are looking for a safe place where they can be without judgment, without having to feel as though you're on the defense, as it were. So, I can understand and appreciate the need, the desire to carve out that unit. So we look at things like Kemetic yoga. We look at things like, my dear friend Leslie Salmon Jones, Afro Flow Yoga in Boston. And even with the name Afro Flow, the people that follow Afro Flow come in all shapes, colors, and sizes.
Yeah.
I think yoga has a real, you must have seen me talk about this somewhere, that being in India and looking at these Israeli men and these Iranian women stand across the garden from each other. And then as the day progressed, they eventually did this until they did this. And I went, wow, this is a real tool for peace. I'd spent over 20 years in the UN by that point, and the UN hadn't been able to achieve this because the labels were cast aside, and we really came to the practice from a place of love.
Mm. Mm.
That's so powerful to hear you speak about. I mean, I immediately want to know more. I'm like a little teary hearing you describe this, and I think that part of I would love to know more about your vision for how we do both. We as a culture, we as a yoga community, how do we create these safe spaces and at the same time kind of raise the standard for using yoga as it's actually designed to be used as a tool for peace? How do you do that? I know you're doing this, like in these coaching circles. I know you're actively doing this. Can you tell us more?
How am I doing it? I'm saying a lot of prayers. I'm spending a lot of time with myself to get really clear as to what it is I am looking to communicate and impart. And part of holding space, as you do, as we all do, is creating a space that's safe. So I do that by being credible, by walking my talk, by establishing healthy boundaries of what will and will not be tolerated within the space that I'm holding. I choose to hold spaces that invite inclusivity, that allows everyone to see and be seen, and to courageously step into the dialogue and really listen. I was on a call last week, part of the James Patterson Healing Circle, Truth and Reconciliation Healing Circle. And, here I am, blessed to be on this sacred land, Bali, at this time. And, we had people coming into the call. One brother, he was supporting the mother of Ahmaud Aubrey. We had, another brother who was the son of Stokely Carmichael. So when I show up to a call like that, I become the student because you're living in the reality. So, one of the things that was coming up for a lot of people and still is a fair bit of anger. Now, as women, how we're programmed to deal with anger or not deal with anger. Little girls don't get angry. It's not ladylike to be angry. Then, you add the dimension of race and the stereotype of the angry black woman. Woe is the angry black woman. And so for a long time, I shied away from that title because I didn't want to be labeled as such. And in fact, I was having a conversation with a woman in South Africa a few weeks ago, and she goes, well, why would you shy away from that title? There's great power in anger that gets catalyzed and transformed, and then we can actually create the transformation. There's not a revolution on this planet that has been born without some degree of anger. Anger is the fire. That's what ignites the flame. The love, the compassion, the patience, the understanding, the faith, the hope, the courage. It's that which keeps the fire burning. But, if we all decide, well, it's all peace and love, which is one of the the challenges of this yoga community with love and light. You know,
Mm,
let's not whitewash. Let's not try to spiritually bypass legitimate feelings that people are having. It's the outrage and the anger that has the three of us coming here together to really listen to each other and see how can we contribute to this conversation in a way that's constructive.
mm, mm. I
Kind
love
of feel
that.
like I went
I love
all
that.
over the place.
Oh no, you hit the nail right on the head, because that's so powerful. That space of being able to connect with that love and connect with that light, but at the same time really honor all the feelings, really honor anger especially, you know. And I feel like I'd love to know what your comparison is now. Like you described um, growing up and how it's seen and how anger is treated, especially for women, and understanding that now and knowing that you have a deeper connection to anger and how to use it. How do you transform it now? Like how do you actually help? Because if we say everyone just get angry, who knows what will go down, and it might be good for everyone, for everybody to just get angry suddenly. But what are
Well,
some ways that you found that transmute?
on that level, I'm deeply grateful for my practice of yoga, for the use of the breath. One of the things, the somatic experiencing, moving things through the body. There is so much that's moving through our bodies at the moment
Mm,
that, keeping all of that in. We've heard a lot of talk about our central nervous systems, people coming down with strange diseases out of nowhere because the body keeps the score, So any story that we have running in the circuitry, we want to clear it within the body first,
mm,
feeling what we're feeling so that we're then able to respond as opposed to reacting. For me, anger at the physical level, there's something that kind of snaps in me. This is what my anger story feels like. Um, and when that snaps, it's like I know I have to act. It's one of these things, and usually this
mm,
comes with age and wisdom. I give it a night's sleep. And so if I go to bed disturbed about something and I wake up and it's my first thought in the morning, then I know I have some work to do. I
mm,
remember there was a video I did a few weeks ago. I first did the video around Ahmad Aubrey, and I didn't post the video because I was afraid. I had showed up angry black woman hoodie and all, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to,
Came out with the hoodie.
and then when George Floyd happened, that was when I posted the video,
Mm,
Oh,
mm,
wow.
yeah.
you know, and the encouragement, not well, we are seeking validation to some extent, but the support I got was absolutely overwhelming because one of the things that has happened for so long, and this is what's giving rise to the anger, in my humble opinion, is this business of being good and doing good, and being good and doing good. I've done all that you've said I'm supposed to be good. I've gone to school, I've studied my book, I've gotten the job, I've studied this, I've done that, and still you're messing with my psyche on the basis of my skin color.
Mm,
There's a point at which being good says you've got to stand up and go, right, enough is enough. And so stepping, and then you put these masks on top of us, particularly as women and us fight, coming into our voice. What does this mask symbolize? So we're all covered here. Everyone's like this in their eyes, and it's like, come on.
yeah. That's like a nice recipe for good enough pressure to get
Yeah.
make things come through. To have things come through.
I have a
And when you
question.
isolate us, sorry, you go ahead, Jesse.
No.
I want to hear the isolation.
Yeah, you keep going. I will hold it. I'm not going to forget.
Yeah, so it's I saw a talk the other day where someone had asked the question as to whether or not this may have been planned. Who knows?
Mm.
Um, if this was indeed planned, to have these two things overlay, whoever the planners are must be going, what the expletive? Because I'm sure what's coming was not what was expected. You have people isolated and locked up for 8, 9, 10, 11 weeks. Some of us deal with isolation better than others. Some of us live in environments where being isolated puts us at greater risk. Domestic
Right.
abuse, child abuse. You look at countries like South Africa, where for some of those children, the only meal that they were getting in the day was through some food program at their school. The school is now closed. The parents cannot social distance because the work that they do requires them to go out. So they're hungry, they're afraid, they're angry, and you have them in lockdown. Oh my God. Come
Hmm.
on. Come
Yeah.
on. I think, you have just pushed everyone's back up against the wall. And then, we're feeding ourselves through these gadgets that we're living in or living through. And then we sit down and we watch this thing for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And you go, what? Come on.
Tops blown off.
Tipping point.
Uh-huh.
Tipping point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
You may have just answered my question, but I'll ask it anyway, which is that I do not feel like I really understand why this is the moment when enough is enough. It's clear to me that I feel like definitely this is different. I've never experienced this before. I feel this sense of not just permission, but like explicit mainstream encouragement to be mad, to be talking about race, to be talking about racism, to be calling people out. I had that like I had permission and training to do that 20 years ago, but it did not feel like it was socially acceptable to do so. And it's not that I feel like everyone it's not everyone's on my page with me, but I don't care anymore. I feel a sense of like, yeah, y'all, Shri, say it again, like y'all late, you know? You
yeah.
can disagree with me if you want, but I know the truth of this. If
Mm.
you're not with me in thinking that this is something that is important enough to be talking about and having hard conversations about, you're going to be left behind. You go do
Mhm.
your thing. And I don't understand I don't know why that feels so different to me than it has ever felt before.
Mm.
People have been dying for a long time. Cops have been killing black people for a long time. The quarantine is different, but the quarantine was going on for some time. Like I'm really curious to know what your lens on that is. And also if you agree with me, like if you think that actually things are different, or if you think that actually we're at risk to keep doing more of the same that we've been doing.
Yes, we know that this has been going on forever. What I really think the tipping point was that we were actually slowed down. There was nowhere for us to run out to. We weren't going to work. We weren't going to meet a friend for a drink where we could numb out. We were standing still, as it were. And, part of the lead up of this time of COVID is COVID really demanded, whether or not you wanted to accept the invitation to the pandemic party, for you to go, what the hell am I doing with my life?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? And
Definitely.
and yeah, and so what is even more is that where COVID attacks the human body is in our ability to breathe. So really now I'm on a life and death situation. I'm on death row,
Mm.
whether I like it or not. And then because God has a wonderful sense of humor, we then get to witness the breath being squeezed out of someone, while breath is a premium in the time that we're living in.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, yeah. And so, and it's, especially as yogis, we know what it is to breathe and the meaning of breath. My father, may his soul rest in peace, died a couple of years ago, and I was honored to be with him as he took his last breaths. And one of the things that was sort of like an out of body experience for me as a yogi, you know, as yogis, we all tell people you want to breathe in the belly, you don't want to breathe in the chest. We cut off our lung capacity if we're only breathing in the chest. And as he was sick in hospital leading up, his nurses asked me to do some breath work with him because he was having some anxieties. And I couldn't get dad to understand what it meant to breathe from the belly. Well, in his final breaths, he breathed from the belly like a baby because
Ah,
it's naturally. And I went, oh, wow, this is it. Babies breathe naturally, once a man, twice a child. So, you know, as he was transitioning to his maker, as he called his God, he returned to his breath, his natural breath, you know. So, we're not being tear gassed, we're not being shot at, we're not being, yes, there's some lynching, etc. But it's the primalness, the basicness of the fact that what was under attack was our breath. Everyone can relate to breath. Whether you're an animal or a human being, we all relate to breath.
I love
I
that.
just want like
I
the
love that.
space to take in what you're saying. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
I have not been this emotional in any of our conversations so far. We,
Mm.
I think you're doing something on the energetic level as you're speaking. It's very powerful. Very powerful, Nadine.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's
And you answered my question. I just want to acknowledge that I feel powerfully clear about something that I had no clarity about 3 minutes ago listening to you.
wow, wow.
And I will
You
bring
know
that clarity into everything I'm doing. So I'm super
what?
grateful.
Yeah, and you know it's funny because I also think the other thing that brought it, well, certainly for me, um, I won't get into the details of it, but dealing with a family issue, and I had to kind of laugh as here I go again. If when we're connected to self, when we live connected to everything around us, the earth, the trees, the birds, these things that happen to us aren't just isolated incidents. So what, in fact, I had this thought in my meditation this morning. So as I'm dealing with this family issue, what became really important for me in this family issue was I matter. I matter. I'd spend my whole life, you know, trying to please everybody but myself. So here I am defending I matter in the middle of Black Lives Matter. How powerful is that?
Mm.
You know, so I'm living it within this landscape and then pouring that out onto the other landscape. And I think that's part of the bigger conversation that this has brought to the fore, that as human beings, it doesn't matter what you look like, we matter, you know. And so as we start to peel away these constructs that we've lived under, black, white, gay, straight, Indian, whatever it is, these designated titles, how have we limited our fullest potential based on what somebody told us that we were?
Mm. Hmm. It's beautiful to align the two because I feel like sometimes one gets lost. Like that's too spiritual, or that's not focusing on the social matter enough. But I think both of them they go together really well. And just the way and you shared it, that this is actually a spiritual upgrade that the planet is experiencing. This is actually something that's going on underneath what is being seen. And how do we honor both sides of it? How do we honor both sides of it?
And thank you so much for sharing that, Sri. I mean, even this weekend that we're having this call is, you know, astrologically at every level is one of the most potent times that we could step into this discussion, the solstice. You know, we have an eclipse in the mix. We're dealing with Juneteenth. We have World Yoga Day. We have Black Divinity Meditation Day. It's like there's a lot that's packed into this energetically. And you know, our ancestors, our foreparents, they lived connected to source. You know, the industrial era, all of that moved us away from our center. But what's really beautiful is that we're coming back to center through those very things, connecting with the earth, increasingly I'm hearing these conversations about, food security. It's not just about the ability to feed ourselves, but how are we feeding ourselves? Because if we're conscious of what we're putting into our bodies, it's going to shift what's happening at a cognitive level. That becomes the consciousness rising, and then we start to make different choices.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Massive.
I love that you were saying something, Nadine, and one of our peeps, Erica, commented as you were speaking, as within, so without. And after she wrote that, you started talking about food and made it even more literal. And I think that's what I keep experiencing with you, is that you give me like some seed, some piece of a thread of a thought, and I take it, and then you take me deeper over and over and over again. It's just wonderful to be in the presence of your mastery.
Oh, thank you, sister. Thank you. I just saw a question come up, I believe,
Yep.
from Erica. Yes. One of the things that, oh, it's from Ashtara.
Starter.
Yeah. One of the things like yesterday, I probably spent most of the day in bed. Last couple of days leading up to today, the only way I could describe it was that I felt like I was slipping. And my dear writing coach said to me, Nadine, change the dialogue on that. You're in a holding pattern. We know one of the most, what is the word I'm looking for? It's dangerous, but it's also filled with possibility. When an aircraft is waiting to land and you're in that holding pattern and you're circling, and anything can happen in that moment. And so, what I chose to do this weekend is to get really selective about where I was making offerings. I was going to be doing a workshop this weekend on vision boards. I put it out there. I had one person or two people interested. So, in honoring what Source is telling me, Source is informing me that now is not the time for that workshop. It might be in about a week, but it's not happening right now. Today, I'm more or less fasting. I just feel like I really want to stay light in the body. Lots of journaling, lots of resting, setting up a ritual, and really sitting down and getting clear about how can I serve, what's really important to me, and how do I show up in the world, and what is the world that I envision. Because once we can see something, then we can live into it. Until we can see it, then we can't live into it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to echo. I had a conversation today with my CPA. We meet every quarter, generally speaking. So this was kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum of the kind of conversation that we're having. Right? We're looking at spreadsheets, talking about numbers. She said this exact same thing to me. Exactly, almost verbatim what you just said. And so I just think that like, she's like a 64-year-old white woman in Iowa or something. Like and yet this is the okay. And the two pieces, both the reflection and the visioning, but also specifically that when we write down what we want to create, it speeds things up.
Absolutely.
When we give numbers
Absolutely.
to it, when we put dates on it, when we put those intentions into writing, where we're like held accountable internally. It's nothing to do with somebody else, but just on the inside, allowing ourselves to want what we want, allowing ourselves to speak it out loud, write it down, put it on the vision board. I mean, you are talking in my mind. I'm like, this is your vision board workshop. You just gave it
Exactly.
in 2 minutes.
Exactly. Exactly. And also, what I love about the writing process and the journaling process is that it helps to put some distance between what's going on here and here, so that you can actually look at it and go, well, what in this is really true for me right now? What is really serving me at this point in time? And all of the great personal development gurus that we know, going from Tony Robbins to my coach Lisa Nichols to whoever, is you want to write things down. That's where the manifestation process begins. So you know what you're doing with your time, and now more than ever, it's super important for us to know what we're about and what we're doing. Why? Because we can't do everything. This is one of the things, we can't do everything. And if we attempt to do everything, then we're going to burn out. This word that's running around, finding your allies, I'm not 100% comfortable with the word allies because I have a military association to it. But really, who is in your community? Who do you align with? The mere fact that you and I share someone like Elena Brower, I know that we're in alignment. You know what I'm saying? And so in being able to trust myself and trust the process, I know that whatever that we come together for in the greater good will serve thousands of people. Because as one person is impacted, they then ripple that out to everything else that they do.
Amen. Aho.
Aho.
Fuck yeah.
And we've certainly like received a massive amount of free space due to the pandemic. It's like almost resembles a medicine ceremony in that way of like, okay, pause, slow down, I might die. And my last like intense ceremony. I almost every time I'm taken to that edge of like near death, and it's interesting because you don't want to compare them too much because people are actually dying. So it's like there's like a almost feels like a risk to say this, and at the same time, understanding that this is all coming as a blessing. We live from that space, like everything, you know, the conversation of this pandemic was created by someone. Like you brought that up. Maybe, maybe not. I know everything ultimately is coming from the divine to serve me in my highest good and kind of living in that dimension, living in that world. And at the same time, having some discernment and connecting it in and like, oh, we're still wearing masks. Okay, cool. Let me be a part of that. And it's just the beauty of that balance. And can we say that this is almost like a global medicine ceremony that the world is experiencing right now?
I absolutely feel that way. Someone, I can't remember who it is, but something I read a few weeks ago, and he said in this post that, and this was before we're in the issue we're in now, but talking about corona, and one of the things he said was, you can either look at this pathologically or you can look at this mythologically. Now, the way I interpret the world as a storyteller is mythologically. And of course, there is a connection to them. And I came across the story of the goddess Ainana, who is also Ishtar. And the story of the goddess Ainana is really the journey into the underworld. And each time, and we're looking at the divine feminine that lives in both masculine and feminine, for her to get to the underworld, she has to go through 7 gates. And at each gate, she has to remove another layer of herself. By the time she gets to the underworld, she's naked. Before she goes into the underworld, she says to her maid, if I don't come back within a certain time, I'd like you to do A, B, and C to get me. And so she arrives in the underworld to support her sister, who has recently lost her husband, and her sister kills her. The ultimate betrayal, and the ultimate betrayal. Her maid comes back, she gets her, and she returns. And as I said to someone, I'm not naked yet, but I'm very close. So for me, this is an initiation, and it's a rite of passage, Each thing peels away another layer. And so in those moments, we have to be discerning. We have to be connected to self. We have so much information coming at us. What is this landscape telling you? And the thing that has served me most, thank you, thank you, thank you, is the ability to listen and trust and discern what I'm being told. Because we can be pulled in 50 different directions. So, the fear is real. Many people have said to me, are you afraid of getting the pandemic? I've lived in a few places and seen a few things. My greater fear has been the impact of what happens economically, because there are people that will never survive this. There are people whose lives have been ruined. There are children who are not being educated as a result of. Yes, let's all do homeschooling. Homeschooling is a luxury if you have at least one computer. You have half a dozen children. How the hell are you going to homeschool these children? You know, we look at the role of the mother, the wife, the CEO. Now she's at home with three children and she's supposed to wear 19 hats simultaneously. You know, so while we may all be in the same storm, we're not all in the same boat.
Mhm.
Um, so I absolutely agree with you. This is a global medicine ceremony at the highest level.
Mm-hmm. It takes time to put yourself in the shoes of another in this time. It takes a second to even realize the importance of that. Like, oh, because look, this is where we're living on the beach. Things are so nice. Things are growing. Things have grown since the pandemic for us, and so it's an interesting juxtaposition to kind of be in the world right now, experiencing what we're experiencing, and then at the same time, like actively put ourselves in the shoes of George Floyd. Actively put ourselves in the shoes of the cop that killed George Floyd. Actively put ourselves emotionally and feel what's going on in the world at the same time. It's definitely a powerful thing to be requested of us, and not get lost in the spiritual world or lost in our own reality, but be a part of everything. And I love that. I love that we're all yogis in this circle because you know we've been prepared for this. Everything that we're doing, every session, every downward dog, every meditation has brought us into this space where we can now kind of have this equal poised state still. You know, I think that's yeah.
Yes, because the mat becomes the mirror. You know, our mat is our mirror. That's where we get to really look at ourselves, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And yeah,
Mm,
oftentimes, as we know as yogis, sometimes what's showing up on the mat is not necessarily what we want to see, yet it's the very thing that we need to look at.
mm,
And, you know, the other invitation of this time is that, you know, it's an invitation into the shadow work. And the beauty of the shadow, as we know, is that that's where your diamond lives. You know,
mm,
there's all of
mhm,
this business about people talking about the light. And of course, by all means, move towards the light, but try not, you got to go through that darkness to come out into the light. And if you try to bypass it, that's when you get screwed. And I think what has happened is that there's been a collective bypassing, particularly around the issue of race. You know, when people say to me they didn't know it was this bad, it's like, where the hell have you been living? You know, and so, and I say that not from a place of judgment, but it's just like where our levels of consciousness were. You know, it's one of these things where now that, you know, the veil has been removed, it's like, wow, so this is what this person meant. This is what was really happening, you know. And yeah, even this celebration of Juneteenth, you know, it's beautiful that we're able to actually honor the day now, and how the day takes on a different meaning. Circumstances make me what I am. I think Buju Banton sings that. When you look at, I remember at the start of this year, at the start of every year, I choose a word that's going to be my compass for the year, as it were. And this year, the word I chose was courage. I knew what was happening, what I had to face in terms of a family dynamic. I didn't know the extent to which courage would be required for me to live in this time.
mhm, mhm,
I I relate to so much of what you're saying. This last piece, it's the idea that because we also were more deliberate, I think, about our intention setting this year than ever. Right, 2020, we are doing this 2020 program,
We went to India to
If we
think
took
about
people
it.
to India to take, right, like we put a lot of energy into that,
Yeah.
having no idea. I mean, no, who knew? But it's been really powerful to reflect on how we set ourselves up to move through this time, consciously and unconsciously. And I'm very aware both that those of us with spiritual technology already available to us have been better off this whole time since the quarantine started. We've had more resources, we've had more access to resilience. Regardless of our circumstances, if we know how to breathe, we have more access to resilience. When the race conversation, I want to say, like, took over the quarantine conversation. That was my experience.
Definitely.
The world was talking about COVID. The whole world, everyone, one
Yeah.
conversation for the first time in my experience, in my lifetime. And then suddenly that platform where everyone was already talking about the same thing got landed with this new topic.
And I love
And
that nobody cared if they were gonna die or not anymore. Everybody was, how many people were at those protests? Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. They're like social distancing out the window for this cause. It's really interesting to see the level of commitment and level of desire that even though there's a global pandemic, something that is killing people, we're gonna go out. So I think that's huge to see, to witness. Yeah.
Yes, wow. I heard the gist of what you're saying. We got a little distorted, but there are a couple of things I wanted to comment on. Where you spoke about going to India, I went to South Africa just before this pandemic hit, and it was a trip that I deliberated for several reasons whether or not to go. And at the 23rd hour, I decided to go. And I now understand why I was called to go because I visited South Africa first in 1995, shortly after apartheid ended, and then to now go back and see where it is. And I was in Cape Town. I was amongst very affluent white South Africans, and though I felt welcome, I was also very present to my blackness, as it were. And it's like, oh wow, what was I being primed for? Going to visit places like Robben Island, looking in that cell that Mandela sat in for 21 or 14 or however many years he was at Robben Island. And it just, South Africa, and there are still issues that are being resolved in South Africa, but South Africa has happened in my lifetime. So I do believe that what we're doing at this time can absolutely implement change. Your children may enjoy the benefits of that change, or your grandchildren, but the reality is we're on our way. There's no shadow of a doubt to me that we're on our way.
How do you? What do you feel like is the pushing force for this momentum? Like in the beauty that we're on our way.
You mean
What's the thing?
what do I feel that needs to keep happening to keep the momentum? Is that the question?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
I think one of the things that Jesse touched on very early on is economics. The reality is, particularly for people of color, we have a story around money that needs to be broken. And my feeling on where it comes from is, this whole business of slavery and the slave not considered entirely human. And that runs in our DNA, so our worth, stepping into our full worth, as it were, supporting our businesses. And it's not about black on black. That's a huge part of it that, we need to put that money back in. But we also need to be sure that the bodies that can effect change are being funded so that can take place. That has to be a necessary part of the conversation. And everything has to begin with self. So we got to clean up in here. we then have to clean up what's happening in our families, in our communities, and spread that out into the world. So I feel those are the two things. I myself have wondered, oh my goodness, is this going to die down like another social media frenzy? I don't think so. There are too many of us out there doing work, and there are too many of us that are committed to the cause. Um, and one of the things that I think has a huge role to play in the cause is what I call artivism. Look at what's coming through our art. Our art has been speaking to us forever. I mean, last night I watched a documentary with John Coltrane, and you look at his whole musical journey, and you look at the genius of people, Miles Davis, Dizzy Gillespie,
Mm.
John Coltrane. I mean, that kind of genius playing music in a time where they had to sit at the back of the bus and use a different toilet, and still they showed up and played the music.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
yeah, we've got to take the art and let the art be the voice, let the art speak through. It's one thing to read, look at the documentaries, by all means, 13th, all of that. Look at the art, because so much of who we are and how we express ourselves comes through our art.
Mm.
Srikala,
Yes.
it's your time.
Loud and clear.
Yes,
It's our time.
yes, 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 yes.
Yes.
I
Yes.
do feel, I'm hearing as you're speaking, my understanding just keeps getting clearer and clearer that for people who are already doing some kind of spiritual practice, some kind of consciousness work, some kind of personal development, there's like I saw us like brownies in Girl Scouts or something like that, when you get like a new badge and you've like, this is such a bizarre metaphor for me to even think of, but anyway, like we've all gotten this other piece attached to our consciousness work. Like now also this particular thing that has been truly a blind spot, I think, in most spiritual communities, is no longer an acceptable blind spot to have. People will still have it, but it's the norm has shifted. And just because of that, the conversation will keep going, because spirituality has sort of hijacked mainstream in the last 15 years. Yoga is everywhere. I have faith in that. I love that you're bringing history, because it all makes this feel like we have lineage. And I think that there's momentum and energy in lineage. That's like a thread and a theme that's been coming up in these conversations. And I feel like there's like, when we lean on that ancestry, this is not the first time that people have stood up for themselves. This is not the first time that Black people have said, okay, enough already, let's make some change. It fuels the movement.
I love it. Looks like everybody in here is just like artivism. They really love that one. They were like, yes, the power is in the art. I love it.
Yes, yes. And also, I said to a friend of mine yesterday, well, let me backtrack a bit. I have a friend who's from Zimbabwe. She lives in Australia, and her father was a senior politician during the early days of Mugabe. And one of the things that happens, it happens in Jamaica too, but not so much in a ceremonial context. But before each and every political meeting, they would dance. There would be a dance around that. So imagine
Mm.
what would happen if we just took to the street in like intentional dance. There's not a culture on the face of this earth that doesn't have a dance. There's not a culture on the face of this earth that doesn't do something in a circle. By virtue of a circle is all encompassing, it's healing. So, let us bring these things into the fore, because part of what happens is, as we're moving the body and moving stuff out of the body and into the earth, we're clearing space so that we become receptors and deliverers for that which we wish to call forth.
Mm.
So it has to be an integrated process. It has to be an integrated process.
Mm. Powerful.
How can Srikala and I, and everyone that's watching this live and on the replay, how can we serve you personally and the work that you're doing in the world, Nadine?
Thank you so much for that offer. I am deeply touched and deeply grateful for that. And in addition to serving me, it's also how we serve ourselves. As a wisdom mentor and yoga teacher, my Dharma Dialogues is a beautiful offering that combines yoga with mentoring, a 75-minute offering. Periodically, I run experiential workshops. I usually promote them on Instagram Live. Yoga Barn, we're about to, oh, I must say this. Well, it's your, I'll send it to you, or you can see it on my Instagram. We're doing a huge offering for World Yoga Day tomorrow, and our focus is on Black Lives Matters. So, if people want to drop into that, and just by keeping in touch during this period, I have run my life pretty much on donations. And I want to say that there have been moments where I've been dismayed by humanity, and there have been moments where I've been so encouraged by humanity. And so there's a balance there. I have pretty much for the last 4.5 months where Yoga Barn has been closed. So I've lost about 80% of my income along with many of us. Teaching engagements. I mean, it's funny. You mentioned this earlier on, Jesse. So many of us, 2020 was the year. We were like, yes, we're going to go get it. I mean, I had a stellar lineup for 2020. And you know what 2020 has given me or given us? Time to sharpen the tools. There were some other lessons that we needed to learn and sandpaper and brush up so that when we show up fully loaded, as it were. So I'm looking forward to 2021. I'm looking forward to stepping more into this space. If people feel moved to donate to the causes, the things I'm up to, PayPal info@universalempress.com. And I'm here, send me a message. I'm here to serve. I do weekly talks. A lot of my work comes through my meditations and downloads. And so I'm here. I'm here to collaborate. I'm here to serve. And as I serve, so too do I get served. So this is not a monologue. This is a dialogue.
I love that. I feel some kind of a music project brewing with you. And I don't say
Indeed.
that for everyone and with everyone, but I feel like there's something magical that we can do and we can serve a lot
And
of
I'm just typing this in chat here. One of the things I also really want to acknowledge you, Sri, for, and one of the things I want to start. This is where I need a little encouragement because I am a little afraid. I will confess. We need to start creating space for men. There's a lot of work that's happening amongst us as women's circles and healing and women getting together. But we, the creatrixes, we, the givers of life, we who birth our husbands, our brothers, our sons, there's a space that needs to be held for the divine masculine, the sacred masculine. And so I really want to acknowledge you for that because we need more and more of this space. And then there's a point where we have to do this.
Yes, I appreciate that. I'm here and I felt that download, that transmission that you just sent my way. And I appreciate that. I appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, of course I could speak forever and I feel
Forever.
I
would
feel
listen
so,
to you
so, so
forever.
uplifted.
Well, we have more conversations to talk about in the future. So
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I'm gonna take the authority that this particular host role offers me and say even more explicitly that if you have not already, follow Universal Empress on Instagram. Tune in to what she's doing. I love the ask that everyone that's watching donates. Can you pull that link up again, Sri?
Yep.
Because first of all, nobody has ever done that, and I just, I like money. Like, let's freaking go into this.
That's a good point, Jesse. That's a good point.
I would really enjoy it if Nadine was like, "Holy smokes, guys! Like, I was excited to just talk to you, but then I got bank in the bank. This is so." Like, it doesn't matter how much, but there is a transmission, a blessing that comes when we decide to say, yes, I want to contribute in this way. Nadine was bold enough, brave enough, generous enough to ask, let's meet her there. And everyone send her a little something something or a big something something to acknowledge her in her wisdom and mastery. I'm so grateful for you, Nadine.
As I am for you. Thank you so much. Thanks to you both and for who you are being in the world. And in fact, Jesse, there's one of your videos where you're wearing a fabulous orange dress, which you can fold up and put away. I'm joking. But when I watched that video with you, something came through. There's another dimension, and we'll talk about that another time. But I love what you're up to in terms of success and worth and abundance. So important.
Yes.
So important.
Yes.
Yeah, I am available. I am super great. I mean, I don't know that we would know each other, Nadine, if it weren't for the upheaval that's happening in the world. So for my part, I'm super grateful for that. I agree. I think there's many, many things for us to do together, and I'm really excited about them.
Thank you. And Sri, before we close, thank you for being an extraordinary king to this magnificent queen. Every queen needs an incredible king. So thank you for holding that space, brother. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Solid.
Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you.
Yes, indeed. All the time.
Nadine, thank you so much for spending your time with us on this Saturday afternoon. Thank you for everyone who has been with us live.
Yes, indeed.
Diana, Nancy, Ashtara, Tamar.
My mom was here. That's always fun.
Cheryl, Mommy, Annie, Jaya.
And someone sent a donation. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. Yeah.
Erica B, Isabel, so many. So thank you, Nyla. Thank you all for being here and contributing your energy, and let's reconnect, Nadine. There's more.
Yes, indeed. And we'll be back Tuesday. Tuesday as our next race, spirituality, and success conversation. We'll be with Rihanna Hartley, and
She's South
Nico,
African.
and Nico Nelson. So that's gonna be epic. It's gonna be epic.
Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. See you somewhere in the world soon. Lots and lots of love. Mwah.